Well, thanks, everybody. So good to have you here in our LinkedIn Live. Lisa and I are doing a summer series of support. We also call this Resilient Strategies for Navigating Business Challenges. Say that 10 times fast. So we are extremely excited. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I'm great, Dean. How are you?
Good, good. We're so excited to have Jack Miller with us. Jack is CEO and president of T360. He's our boss. And there is something big going on, and we wanted to make sure you guys were aware of it. So we're going to talk about the compensation lawsuits that are out there and how that could be impacting you and how you can prepare today to be ready for that. And frankly, it will help you not only, and we're all in the same room, so if you see me turn to my left, it's because Jack's sitting right to my left. So with that said, this is where you just talk about what's going on in compensation lawsuits. Jack's going to update us. And then also we're going to talk about some strategies and ways that you could really start preparing today and benefit today, frankly, no matter what happens with these lawsuits. So Jack, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Dean and Lisa. I appreciate you guys bringing me into this series. I know that our focus this summer with all the changes happening in the industry is on supporting our industry clients and everybody that's out there actually really working hard to keep things running during a challenging year. So I'm delighted to be here. I wanted to speak this morning to the group about a letter that we just released this morning. We have been following issues related to the compensation lawsuits, the class action lawsuits very closely, including writing about them in our most recent trends report. It was the number one trend in the Swanepoel Trends Report for 2023. Which is just all of the potential impacts of these compensation class action lawsuits. And we've been writing about these for really since they started. So we've got other chapters in previous reports that have been covering this issue. So in the last 2 weeks, there has been a settlement in one of the cases that is relevant to all of the kind of compensation issue, No Select versus MLS Penn. MLS Penn has settled with the plaintiffs for a $3 million settlement. And in that settlement has agreed to make the compensation not required in the MLS system in MLS Penn. And so this represents a fundamental change in the compensation element of the cooperation compensation in the MLS, and means that brokers and agents that are operating in the MLS Penn environment are not required to put any compensation into the MLS. And this has a lot of downstream effects. It means that consumers in those markets may be confronted with a situation where they may not have representation that is being compensated. Listing agents may be in scenarios where there's no buyer agent involved, or they're involved in a more transactional brokerage type situation. And so it was significant enough to see a settlement in one of these cases that we felt now was the time to issue a call to action to the industry about this potential change to the compensation structure. So this may or may not be coming to your market in the future, but we think that everybody should be getting ready. So this morning, we sent out a letter to industry leadership and outlined what we think industry leaders at all levels should be working on to be prepared for these changes, which, by the way, we believe are a substantial improvement to the consumer-agent relationship and to the professionalism of the real estate industry overall. And so these changes, while they will, we think, help in terms of addressing some of the underlying issues in these class action lawsuits, are also beneficial, we think, to the business. And so we feel like, given that, and that we just had a settlement happen, now is the time for people to pay attention and act. So I'm going to quickly just talk a little bit about what we are recommending for brokers, for MLS leadership, for agents, what we're recommending for people to do in this new scenario. So first, we had recommendations for the National Association of Realtors that they should pass a mandatory rule to the MLS policies and code of ethics that require buyer brokers to have a broker representation agreement in place in order to show MLS property. And we believe that that will make this an industry standard. We think that should be the industry standard, that compensation is clearly outlined to a buyer, what their agent is being paid, how they're being paid, and that should be agreed to on the front end. This protects both the consumer and provides transparency to the consumer, as well as is good for the agent. as an agent, then you know that if you're working with a customer, you have a compensation agreement in place, and that, regardless of whether compensation is offered in the MLS or not, that you have a way that you will get paid for all the hard work that you do in representing your clients and negotiating and showing homes and doing all the things that are necessary. So we've made that recommendation that NAR pass those rules and make that a mandatory requirement. We also have advocated that lobbying commence to enable the buyer broker commission to be financed, and that it could be included in traditional financing, FHA, VA, all of the different financing elements, so that those services can be paid for as part of the loan. The risk is, if there's not a way to pay for buyer agency representation services, that people will go unrepresented, and that creates a risk to the consumer. It's not a great consumer experience. And we believe in the biggest transaction that a consumer will go through, they should have appropriate representation to negotiate on their behalf and help them have a quality transaction and get into a home where they've had an advocate and somebody working with them. At the brokerage level, we're advising that brokerages begin as soon as possible to require buyer brokerage agreements signed at the beginning of their agents' engagements with buyers. If brokers require it in order for agents to be paid, then we know it will get done. And we think, if you're a broker listening to this is something you should be looking at, as to how to move that up into a requirement that's signed on the front end, and you establish some standards. Obviously, there's some questions about how to handle situations regarding dual agency or transactional brokerage that you should be ready and prepared to answer questions about, in terms of a listing agent selling their own listing and what happens in that instance. And you need to address that in your buyer broker agreements. You need to address that in your training and your policy. So important to that. And then lastly, brokerages, franchise networks, anybody that is providing materials to train buyers agents and listing agents, you need to review your materials and look at how you represent buyer brokerage services, the value of those services to the consumer, and just how those services are delivered. Because we think, we've done a great job in this industry of training listing agents about talking about all the things they do that make them valuable on the listing side. We need to do the same thing on the buyer side and really arm buyers agents with those materials to be able to talk about, here's the services I provide, here's all the different things I'm going to handle for you, and here's how I get paid. Here's how I'm compensated, to make that really clear. So we think, and we know there's some brokerages have already been moving on this, but a lot have not. And so this is a call to action. It's time to act. It's time to get that in order. Lastly, at the agent level, as an agent, you should be reviewing your sales and marketing materials for buyer services and looking at how you describe your buyer services, all the things that you do. I mean, it can start as simply as make a list of everything that you do. And by the way, NAR has some very nice resources on this. It lists, I think, 180 different things that buyers agents do for their clients. It's pretty fantastic. So it's a good place to start. But listing all the things that you do for your clients, tracking your hours and how much time you put in to each one of your transactions, that's going to help you represent your value much better. And then also looking at your individual materials that you work with on the listing and the buy side to address how compensation happens. As a listing agent, you're going to need to address this too, because you're going to have clients that come to you and are going to ask, do I need to offer buyer compensation if you're in a market where it becomes optional? And you should have a strong list of pros and cons that describe the reasons why it's a benefit, and what the cons are, what the pros are in both scenarios. So I think that's going to be important for agents to really get dialed into that. Additionally, work with your broker on issues around dual agency, transaction brokerage. If you're a listing agent, you have somebody that's buying your listing, what you need to do to be compliant with your state and with the rules for either dual agency or transaction brokerage in your state. So that's our overall call to action. There's some notes we have for the MLSs and associations. We think that there's going to be a lot of need for training on this issue and for creation of resources to help buyers agents and agents that work with buyers and brokers address this with the consumer audience and with training their agents. Everyone also needs to be prepared to discuss these lawsuits with their clients, people will ask. There will be ads run that are going to be talking about this. There are going to be attorneys that will see these lawsuits and may do copycat lawsuits. So you need to be up to speed with being able to talk about the lawsuits, talk about industry compensation, discuss with your clients, and if you're a leader, with your agents about how things work and where we're headed as an industry. We highly recommend you stay in tune with news sources like realestatenews.com that's been doing great coverage about these lawsuits and has been writing about everything that's happening and the implications for industry leadership. So definitely stay in tune with this. And then the last thing I'll say is none of this, we're not attorneys. T360 is not an attorney firm. So none of this is legal advice. These are business moves you should make. These are related to training, positioning, education, all of that. You should still have your counsel look at your agreements, look at your forms, look at how you're operating, and make sure that they're compliant in your particular state or area. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of need for help on this if changes do come to pass in your market. And we recommend everybody get ahead of this. It's way better to do the work now and be ready for potential changes, to avoid an issue like has happened in the MLS pen market, where a settlement happened and now they have the rules change, and now everybody is going to have to make changes right away and really, really dive in. So that's my as fast as possible explanation of what's going on. I'm going to turn it back over to Dean and Lisa for questions and follow up on that.
Yeah, one of the things that jumps out at me is I think back to our trends chapter. That was chapter 1, as Jack has just mentioned, and it had a big old picture of an iceberg. And so I think it was just perfectly placed in that. And to Jack's last comments, being more knowledgeable of what's going on in this space and these lawsuits, seeing that iceberg further out allows you to pivot and make moves. And so it gives you time to really go ahead and make good business decisions. Lisa, what are your thoughts? Any thoughts?
Well, the compensation risks aside, and there's just so much on that. I just think, I've been a buyer agent since 2008, had my ABR. I just think it's the right thing to do for the client. So that's the other piece. And then I'd just like to talk a little bit about a program that we're offering, a compensation risk assessment program, where we will evaluate and improve the buyer agent segment of your business, help you to do that. And so we're going to give high level recommendations for you to really secure that buyer agent commission. So some of the things that we'll cover in that is we'll do a benchmark of your effective commission rates on overall for your company, but also on the list side and the buy side. We'll look at your buyer representation agreements and provide some guidance and suggestions on that. Again, not legal advice, but a lot of your associations are providing them. We'll go through the buyer presentation. If you have a buyer presentation, best practices, what should all be included in that. We'll do a marketing and website review to make sure that your website has proper keywords and that you don't have a blog that says buyers or free services, things like that. We'll also look at your buyer agent training and sales processes and how are you handling that, and how are your agents handling objections. So we'll talk through all of that with you and provide you with some recommendations. We'll also look at do a review of your E&O policy as well to see whether or not you have coverage for class action lawsuits. So we'll put the information in with this recording and reach out, but this is definitely an iceberg coming our way, and we're here to support you.
He also, Chris, he'll put in a Calendly link. So if you'd like to just talk about what's happening in your market and what you might have concerns on, or potentially what Lisa just did an overview of, want to hear more about that, feel free to schedule time. We'd love to talk to you about what's going on in your market, going on with your business, especially in this way. And one thing that was alluded on is if you looked at financial analysis, do an analysis and look at the buy side commission. Everyone typically rolls it all together, buy side, list side, and total closed units, total the average commission percentage. Break it out, buy side, sell side. Look at what percentage you have of buy side versus list side and what that amount is. And that should really open your eyes, say, wow, I need to make sure I get in front of this and I start making some real strategic moves now and not wait. So with that, we're going to conclude our call here. Jack, thanks so much for being here.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
We'll see you same time next Wednesday for our summer of support.
That's summer series of support.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.